Hey guys, tonight we're taking a truly grueling journey, not to the glorious battlefields or the monumental cities of the Roman Empire, but straight onto the dusty, muddy, and perpetually uncomfortable paths trod by its most essential component, the Roman soldier. You're about to discover how Roman soldiers endured horrifying marching conditions, a relentless grind of unimaginable physical exertion, crushing burdens, and constant peril that made every step a testament to sheer endurance, and often to sheer misery. Forget your comfortable sneakers and lightweight backpacks. This was a nightmare of sweat, blisters, and an almost unbearable load. Frankly, you probably wouldn't survive the first day of a Roman march without collapsing from exhaustion and begging for a chariot ride. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me, where in the world are you tuning in from? And what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself suddenly standing on a rough, unpaved road somewhere in Gaul, perhaps around the 1st century CE. The morning air is damp and chilly, but you can already feel the promise of the day's heat. You are a Roman legionary, a hardened professional soldier, part of a disciplined marching column stretching for miles ahead and behind you. Your uniform is practical: a tunic, heavy hobnailed sandals, caligae, and perhaps a cloak if the weather demands it. But the real story isn't your clothes. It's the colossal weight you are carrying. This is the soldier's burden, your sarcina, and it is a back-breaking, sweat-inducing, constant companion that defines every step of your marching life. Imagine strapping on a load that could easily exceed 60 to 80 pounds, 27 to 36 kilograms, sometimes even more, particularly during forced marches or when campaigning in hostile territory. This wasn't just your personal gear. It was effectively your entire mobile survival kit, mandated by strict Roman military regulations. What did this monstrous load consist of? Well, let's break it down, and you'll quickly see why it was so horrifying. Firstly, your personal armor and weapons. Even when not in battle formation, you'd be carrying essential pieces. Your lorica hamata chainmail or lorica segmentata segmented plate armor could weigh anywhere from 20 to 30 pounds on its own, even if worn mostly during combat or camp duties. Your gladius short sword, pugio dagger, and your shield scutum were all part of your regular load. The scutum, a heavy rectangular shield designed for protection in formation, was a cumbersome item to carry on a long march, often strapped to your back or carried in your hand. This protective gear, while vital for survival in battle, was a constant, dead weight during every mile. It truly sucked to carry your own protection like a second skin. Then came your personal tools. Every legionary was a walking, digging, building machine. You'd carry a dolabra, a heavy pickaxe for digging trenches and fortifications, a sarcina pole, a long stick over your shoulder, from which various items were hung, a small shovel ligo, a basket coffinus for earth, and sometimes even turf-cutting tools. These weren't luxuries, they were essential for building the fortified marching camp that every Roman legion established at the end of each day's march. Regardless of whether they expected an enemy encounter, this meant you were always hauling a construction kit on your back. Next, your rations. You couldn't rely on finding food easily in hostile territory, so you carried several days' worth of provisions, typically hardtack biscuits, dried meat, cheese, and a ration of grain wheat or barley, which you would then grind and cook yourself. This food, while vital, was heavy, bulky, and often monotonous. Imagine the constant smell of dried meat and stale biscuits in your pack. Along with food, you carry a small cooking pot patella, and perhaps a grindstone for your grain. Crucially, you carried your water supply. A Lagena water flask or two, made of leather or ceramic, would hold a precious but quickly depleting supply of water in hot climates. This would be insufficient, and finding reliable, uncontaminated water sources along the march was a constant, desperate concern. The weight of water alone could add several pounds to your already immense burden. It really sucked to carry your survival on your back. Constantly running out? Finally, your personal effects and sundries, a cloak for warmth, spare tunics, extra caligae if you were lucky, and any small personal items that reminded you of home. All of this was carefully packed into a single bundle, often tied to the sarcina pole carried over your shoulder. The entire load was designed to make you self-sufficient for a short period, capable of building a fortified camp and sustaining yourself even far from supply lines. The sheer awkwardness and discomfort of this load were immense. The weight wasn't evenly distributed like a modern backpack. It often hung from your shoulder, pulling at your muscles, chafing your skin, and rubbing you raw. The caligae, while durable, offered little cushioning, meaning your feet would be constantly pounded by the hard ground, leading to blisters, calluses, and chronic foot pain. Every step was a deliberate effort, every incline a monumental struggle. This immense burden was a deliberate part of Roman military training and doctrine, designed to forge incredibly resilient and self-sufficient soldiers. Roman legionaries were famously known as Marius's mules, Muli Mariani, a nickname given after the reforms of Gaius Marius in the late 2nd century BCE, which mandated soldiers carry all their own equipment, freeing up baggage trains. This practice, while increasing the physical burden on individual soldiers, made legions incredibly fast, flexible, and capable of operating independently in diverse terrains, a key factor in Roman military success. This is a common historical fact often overlooked for its human cost. One unique detail, sometimes underestimated, is the psychological impact of constantly carrying such a load. Beyond the physical pain, the relentless weight, the constant presence of your entire survival kit strapped to your back, served as a constant reminder of the arduous nature of your life. It symbolized the perpetual readiness for war, the lack of personal possessions beyond what you could carry, and the complete severance from civilian comforts. This physical burden was also a profound mental one, contributing to the stoicism and grim determination that characterized Roman legionaries. Historians still debate the precise average weight of a Roman soldier's pack, as it varied by period, legion, and specific campaign. Estimates often come from archaeological finds of equipment, textual descriptions by Roman authors, and modern experimental archaeology where reenactors attempt to march with full loads. The consensus, however, is that it was an incredibly heavy burden designed to push the limits of human endurance. So your initiation into the Roman legions was not just about basic training. It was about accepting a life defined by immense, horrifying marching conditions, starting with the backbreaking, omnipresent burden strapped to your back. This colossal load, a testament to Roman military efficiency, was the first, and perhaps most constant, source of physical misery that defined your life as a soldier of the empire, having strapped on your formidable, backbreaking load. Your existence as a Roman legionary was then defined by the relentless, soul-crushing pace of the march. Forget leisurely strolls through the picturesque countryside. This was a forced, disciplined grind, covering immense distances daily regardless of terrain or personal fatigue. This unyielding, relentless pace was a constant, horrifying aspect of enduring marching conditions for a Roman soldier. Imagine the dawn. You've just finished dismantling your camp, a task we'll get to later, eaten a meager breakfast, and now, before the sun has fully risen, the order comes forward. You fall into formation, one of hundreds, then thousands of legionaries, forming a seemingly endless column. The centurions, the backbone of the legion's discipline, are at the front, urging the pace, and at the rear, ensuring no one lags behind. You take your first step, feeling the immense weight of your sarcina digging into your shoulders, and you know this is just the beginning of a brutal day. It truly sucked to start the day already exhausted. A standard Roman legionary march, known as a justum iter regular march, covered approximately 20 Roman miles, about 18.5 miles or 29.7 kilometers, in about 5 hours. Now, that might sound manageable on a flat, paved road with a light backpack, but remember the 60-80 pounds of gear you're carrying, the rough, often unpaved terrain, and the fact that you're marching as part of a tightly disciplined military unit, not at your own leisure. This pace was relentless. A constant, measured grind designed to push you to your physical limits, day after day. But it got worse, a forced march. Or Magnum Iter could cover up to 30 Roman miles, about 27.5 miles or 44.3 kilometers in a single day. Imagine marching a modern marathon, not in athletic gear, but in hobnailed sandals, carrying a quarter of your body weight, over uneven ground, through all kinds of weather, often with little rest. This was typically done in emergencies to respond to a sudden threat or to surprise an enemy. These were the marches that pushed soldiers to the brink of collapse, where every muscle screamed in protest and every step was an act of sheer will. It really sucked to participate in a human-powered forced march. The pace was often dictated by the legion's lead elements and enforced by the centurions. They would set a steady, unforgiving rhythm, ensuring that the entire column maintained cohesion. There was no slowing down for fatigue, no breaks for blisters, no stopping for a moment's rest unless explicitly ordered. If you lagged, if you stumbled, if you fell out of formation, the consequences could be severe, ranging from a public beating to being forced to carry even more weight. The constant pressure to keep up, to not show weakness, was a profound psychological burden that added to the physical strain. The terrain itself was a relentless tormentor. You weren't always marching on the famous Roman paved roads. Often, you'd be cutting through forests, slogging through muddy swamps, climbing steep, rocky hillsides, or traversing arid, dusty plains. Each type of terrain presented its own unique challenges. Mud is sucking at your caligae, rocks twisting your ankles, dust filling your lungs, or slippery inclines threatening a fall under your heavy load. These very conditions required constant vigilance and adapted movement. Adding to your exhaustion, the relentless pace had profound physiological consequences. Your feet, encased in their hard caligae, would develop agonizing blisters, raw chafing, and deep calluses. Chronic foot pain, shin splints, and knee problems would be common. Your shoulders and back, constantly burdened by the sarcina, would ache relentlessly. Your muscles strained and knotted. Dehydration would be a constant concern, especially in hot climates, as your body sweated profusely under the exertion, and water sources might be scarce or contaminated. You were perpetually fatigued, your body pushed to its absolute limits, week after week, month after month. It really sucked to feel your body breaking down with every step. One common misconception is that Roman soldiers were universally well-fed and rested, allowing them to endure these marches easily, While Roman military rations were generally sufficient to prevent outright starvation, they were often monotonous and lacked fresh produce, leading to chronic malnutrition for many soldiers. Rest, especially during a forced march, was minimal, often just a few hours of sleep before the next grueling day began. This constant physical depletion compounded the difficulty of the marching conditions. Historians still meticulously study Roman military logistics and diet to understand the precise caloric intake and nutritional status of legionaries, often finding that, while they were physically robust, their endurance was built on relentless deprivation as much as training. Furthermore, the dust raised by thousands of marching feet and horses would be immense. In dry conditions, you would be constantly enveloped in a cloud of fine, gritty dust, which would irritate your eyes, clog your lungs, and settle into every crevice of your clothing. This constant inhalation of dust could lead to chronic respiratory issues over a long career, contributing to coughs, bronchitis, and other lung ailments. Imagine breathing in grit with every agonizing breath. The psychological toll of this relentless pace cannot be overstated. The monotony of the march, the constant physical discomfort, the fear of falling behind, and the awareness of the immense distance still to cover would create a pervasive sense of despair. You were a human machine, expected to perform without complaint, your personal feelings and physical pain utterly secondary to the legion's relentless progress. This dehumanization, this constant reduction to a mere physical unit, was a brutal part of your daily life. So, your existence as a Roman soldier was defined by the unyielding, relentless pace of the march, a constant physical and psychological grind that pushed your body to its absolute limits, day in and day out. The immense distances, the brutal terrain, and the unforgiving discipline ensured that every single step was a testament to enduring horrifying marching conditions, a reality far removed from any romanticized image of the Roman army. Even as your body was driven to its absolute limits by the relentless pace and the crushing weight of your gear, the natural world itself became a formidable and often deadly adversary. Forget ideal campaigning weather. Roman soldiers endured the weather's wrath, facing scorching heat, freezing cold, and endless rain that turned every march into a brutal test of survival. These extreme environmental conditions made your marching life profoundly horrifying. Imagine starting your march under the relentless glare of the summer sun. In provinces like North Africa, the Middle East, or even parts of Italy and Gaul, temperatures could soar, easily exceeding what a modern soldier might face without specialized gear. You would march for hours under a cloudless sky, your heavy wool tunic clinging to your sweat-soaked skin, your hobnailed sandals pounding on sun-baked earth or dusty Roman roads. The metal components of your armor and equipment would heat up, radiating a stifling warmth against your body. The sun would beat down on your head, even through your helmet, causing intense headaches and dizziness. It truly sucked to literally bake on the march. Heat stroke and severe dehydration were constant, terrifying threats. Your body would sweat profusely, losing vital fluids at an alarming rate. Water, carried in a lagana, was precious and quickly depleted, and finding reliable, uncontaminated sources along the route was a constant struggle. Many soldiers would collapse from exhaustion and heat stroke, their bodies shutting down under the extreme stress. If you fell out of formation, you risked being left behind. A tragic end for a soldier who survived countless battles. The symptoms of heat stroke confusion, nausea, a racing heart, and eventual loss of consciousness were terrifying. As there was no effective treatment in the field, as the seasons turned. The torment continued. The winter months brought a different, equally brutal kind of suffering. In northern provinces like Britannia, Germania, or even the mountainous regions of Dacia, you would endure incredibly harsh winters. Imagine marching for days through biting, icy winds that scoured the landscape, or slogging through knee-deep snow that sapped your energy with every step. Your woolen tunic and cloak, while providing some warmth, were often insufficient against sub-zero temperatures, sleeping in flimsy tents even if well constructed. They were tents nonetheless on cold, damp ground offered little reprieve, leading to chronic chills and sleep deprivation. It really sucked to literally freeze your toes off. Frostbite and hypothermia were constant dangers. Your exposed skin, particularly your hands and feet, would become numb, then turn painfully white, then black, as tissue froze and died. Many Roman soldiers suffered permanent injuries, losing fingers or toes to frostbite, leaving them crippled and unfit for further service. Hypothermia, a systemic drop in body temperature, could silently claim lives, turning a shivering soldier into a lifeless corpse by morning. The pervasive dampness from melting snow or constant rain would compound the cold, making it impossible to stay dry and warm. Rain and mud were relentless tormentors. Regardless of the season, in many parts of the empire, particularly in Western Europe, marching through prolonged periods of rain was common. Your heavy equipment would become even heavier as it absorbed water. The roads, even paved ones, would become slick and treacherous, turning unpaved paths into deep, sucking quagmires of mud. Imagine slogging through knee-deep mud for miles, every step a Herculean effort, your hobnailed sandals offering little grip. This constant dampness would also lead to foot rot, skin infections, and the proliferation of lice and other parasites, further adding to your misery. It really sucked to wade through ankle-deep mud day after day. The lack of effective shelter on the march compounded these environmental dangers, while Roman legions were renowned for building fortified marching camps every night. These were still open-air camps. Your tent, while a marvel of military engineering, offered limited insulation against extreme cold or heat, and could easily become waterlogged in heavy rain. You were always at the mercy of the elements, even within your carefully constructed temporary fortress. One common misconception is that Roman soldiers, being so disciplined, were immune to the effects of extreme weather. In reality, while their training and gear were designed for resilience, they were still human. Roman military records and medical texts often detail widespread illness and casualties from exposure, especially during ambitious campaigns through harsh climates. For instance, campaigns in Germania or Dacia during winter were notoriously brutal, resulting in significant losses from frostbite and hypothermia, which sometimes dwarfed battle casualties. Historians still meticulously study ancient climate data and military logistics to understand the precise environmental challenges faced by Roman legions in different campaigns and how these factors influenced military strategy and outcomes. Furthermore, the psychological toll of constantly battling the elements cannot be overstated. The endless sun, the biting cold, the perpetual dampness, these would erode your spirit, leaving you perpetually fatigued, irritable, and vulnerable to despair. The human body has limits, and marching day after day through such extreme conditions pushed those limits to their breaking point, turning even the most disciplined soldier into a weary, weather-beaten survivor. So, your life as a Roman soldier was defined not just by the weight on your back or the pace of your march, but by the relentless, unforgiving assault of the weather's wrath, the scorching heat, the freezing cold, and the endless rain turned every mile into a profound battle for survival, ensuring that enduring these horrifying marching conditions was a constant, grueling, and often deadly part of serving the Roman Empire. Even as your body battled the elements and the relentless pace of the march, your internal struggle as a Roman soldier was defined by another pervasive misery: food and water scarcity and squalor. Forget diverse gourmet meals or readily available clean drinking water. Your daily sustenance was monotonous, often contaminated, and barely sufficient, making these marching conditions profoundly horrifying. Imagine the constant gnawing of hunger, a dull ache that never truly left you. Your daily ration, typically a measure of grain, usually wheat or barley, was your primary sustenance. This wasn't flour, it was whole grain, which you, the soldier, were responsible for grinding yourself, often with a small, portable hand mill carried as part of your immense sarcina. Imagine ending a grueling day's march, exhausted and aching, only to face the tedious, arduous task of grinding your own grain before you could even think about eating. This simple act of food preparation was a daily reminder of your fundamental reliance on your own labor and meager supplies. It truly sucked to grind your own dinner after marching a marathon. Once ground, the grain would be mixed with water to form a simple hardtack or biscuit, baked over an open fire, or more commonly, made into a thick, unappetizing porridge or gruel. Meat was a rare luxury, often only available if you managed to hunt or forage, or if the legion successfully plundered enemy territory. Dried meat or salted fish might be part of your provisions, but these were typically tough, bland, and meant for long-term storage rather than culinary delight. Vegetables were scarce, mostly foraged wild greens or whatever could be found in the countryside, often limited by season and the immediate environment. Your diet was monotonous, lacking in essential vitamins and minerals, leading to chronic malnutrition that slowly sapped your strength and made you vulnerable to disease. The quality of your food was a constant concern. Without modern refrigeration or food safety standards, spoilage was rampant. Grain could become infested with weevils, dried meat could rot, and foraging for wild plants carried the risk of accidental poisoning. You had to consume what was available, often holding your nose, knowing that every bite could potentially lead to agonizing stomach cramps, vomiting, or debilitating dysentery. Imagine eating a meal that might nourish you or might make you violently ill, all while knowing you still had to march tomorrow. It really sucked to play Russian roulette with your rations. Water was perhaps the most critical and perilous element of your sustenance. You carried a Lagana water flask, but its contents would quickly deplete under the strain of a long march in hot weather. Finding reliable, uncontaminated water sources along the route was a constant. Desperate challenge. Rivers and streams, while seemingly abundant, could be polluted by human and animal waste upstream or by the thousands of marching soldiers themselves. Wells could be shallow and easily contaminated. Drinking suspect water was an almost guaranteed path to waterborne diseases like dysentery, which would cause severe dehydration, relentless vomiting and diarrhea, and often death, rapidly depleting the legion's manpower. The logistics of supplying a Roman legion on campaign were monumental and often strained to their breaking point. While Roman military logistics were arguably the best in the ancient world, even they struggled to provide perfectly fresh and abundant supplies to tens of thousands of men operating in remote or hostile territories. Supply lines could be ambushed, roads could become impassable due to weather, and local foraging could prove insufficient. This constant pressure on supply meant that, for you, the individual soldier, hunger and thirst were never far away, and your rations were often the bare minimum required for survival. One common misconception is that Roman legions always had a plentiful supply train following them. While baggage trains existed, the reforms of Gaius Marius, the Marius's mules nickname, as mentioned in Chapter 1, significantly reduced the size of these trains by making soldiers carry most of their own gear and several days' worth of provisions. This increased marching speed and independence, but also placed a much heavier burden of self-sufficiency and potential deprivation on the individual soldier. Historians still meticulously study Roman military logistics, supply chains, and archaeological findings of ancient Roman diet, such as food remnants in military camps, to understand the precise nutritional intake and dietary challenges faced by legionaries, often revealing a diet that, while robust in calories, was monotonous and prone to causing deficiencies. Furthermore, the act of cooking your meager rations after a long, exhausting march was another taxing chore. You and your tent mates would have to gather firewood, start a fire often difficult in damp conditions, grind your grain, and cook your porridge or your hardtack. This consumed precious hours of rest that your body desperately craved, adding to the cumulative exhaustion that weakened your resistance to disease and injury. There was no hot meal waiting for you. You had to earn every single bite, even after a day of incredible toil. The psychological impact of perpetual hunger and thirst was immense. It eroded your spirit, dulled your mind, and reduced your existence to a primal obsession with the next meal, the next sip of water, the constant gnawing ache in your stomach, the parched dryness of your mouth would consume your thoughts, leaving little room for anything else beyond survival. This state of chronic deprivation would turn you into a listless, desperate shell of your former self, often leading to a profound sense of hopelessness that could be as debilitating as any physical illness. So, your daily life as a Roman soldier was a relentless battle against food and water, scarcity and squalor. You were perpetually hungry, constantly thirsty, and slowly wasting away from malnutrition, all while performing grueling physical feats. This deliberate or unavoidable deprivation was a defining, horrifying aspect of your marching conditions, ensuring that your path to victory was paved not just with your footsteps, but with the pervasive agony of persistent hunger and the quiet despair of constant thirst. Even as your body battled against the elements and the gnawing pangs of hunger, your life as a Roman soldier was utterly consumed by a demanding, relentless, and physically destructive daily ritual that occurred after each grueling march, the construction of a fortified marching camp. Forget resting your weary limbs. Every single night, regardless of your exhaustion or the weather, you were expected to transform a patch of ground into a defensible fortress, making this constant labor a profoundly horrifying marching condition. Imagine arriving at the designated campsite after marching 20 or even 30 miles, laden with 60 pounds of gear, your feet are aching, your muscles screaming, and you're utterly exhausted. But there's no immediate rest. Instead, the Legion immediately springs into action. This isn't a casual setup, it's a meticulously planned, highly disciplined construction project, executed by thousands of weary men, night after night. It's truly sucked to be an exhausted construction worker after a marathon. The first task for many was to dig a ditch fossa, using your dolabra, pickaxe, and ligo shovel, carried as part of your sarcina. You'd begin to excavate a deep V-shaped trench around the entire perimeter of the camp. This ditch, often 5 feet deep and wide, served as the primary defensive obstacle. Imagine swinging a heavy pickaxe into hard earth or rocky ground, your muscles burning, your hands blistering. After a full day of marching, this initial exertion was immense and physically brutal. Next, the rampart agger. The earth excavated from the ditch was used to build an earthen wall or mound on the inside of the ditch, providing a raised defensive position. This involved moving tons of earth, often in wicker baskets coffinus carried on your back, then compacting it firmly. This constant digging and hauling was relentless, consuming hours of precious daylight or continuing into the dim twilight. As the ditch and rampart took shape, another team would be preparing the palisade stakes volley. Every legionary carried 2 or 3 volley, pointed wooden stakes, often with side branches. On their sarcina pole, these stakes would be firmly driven into the top of the earthen rampart, creating a formidable defensive palisade that made it incredibly difficult for an enemy to scale the wall. Imagine cutting and sharpening these stakes, then driving them into hard earth with brute force, your hands bleeding from splinter and effort. It really sucked to carry your own fence. Simultaneously, other soldiers would be laying out the camp's internal street plan, establishing the locations for the commander's tent praetorium, the treasury questorium, the various legionary units' tents, and the camp's gates. The tents themselves, made of leather, would be quickly erected, providing minimal shelter but a vital space for rest and equipment storage. Each legionary typically shared a tent with 7 other men, forming a contubernium. This entire process, from arriving at the site to having a fully fortified camp, could take anywhere from 3 to 5 hours, depending on the terrain and the urgency. This meant that after a day of marching, you would spend another significant portion of your energy on physically demanding construction work, often completing it long after dark, leaving you with only a few hours for food preparation, brief rest, and guard duty before the cycle began again at dawn. The discipline and precision of this nightly ritual were legendary. Roman legions could construct these fortified camps with astonishing speed and regularity, almost like a well-oiled machine. This was a testament to their rigorous training and the relentless enforcement of discipline. Every soldier knew their role. Every tool had its purpose, and every step was choreographed, ensuring that, regardless of where they stopped, they were always secure. One common misconception is that Roman marching camps were just temporary, flimsy shelters. In reality, they were sophisticated, standardized, and highly effective temporary fortresses. Their meticulous design, including multiple gates, internal roads, and a clear hierarchy of space, allowed legions to remain safe even deep in enemy territory, providing crucial protection against surprise attacks. Historians still meticulously study archaeological remains of Roman marching camps across Europe, revealing their standardized layouts and the impressive engineering feats involved in their rapid construction, confirming the demanding nature of this daily task. Furthermore, the act of daily camp construction served as more than just defense. It was a crucial part of Roman military discipline and cohesion. It reinforced teamwork, obedience, and the understanding that every man's effort contributed to the survival of the entire legion. It left no time for idleness or mischief, ensuring soldiers were perpetually exhausted and focused on their duties, maintaining control over vast numbers of men far from centralized authority. The psychological toll of this endless labor was immense. You were constantly pushing your body past its limits, with no true downtime. The monotony of digging, hauling, and building, day after day, week after week, would erode your spirit. Your body would be perpetually aching, your hands blistered and raw, and your mind dulled by exhaustion. The comfort of your newly built camp was merely a brief respite before the next day's march and the next round of construction. So, your daily life as a Roman soldier was defined not just by the weight on your back or the pace of your march, but by the relentless, mandatory labor of constructing a fortified marching camp every single night, this exhausting, physically destructive task, performed regardless of your fatigue or the brutal weather, was a defining, horrifying aspect of enduring marching conditions, ensuring that even your moments of rest were filled with unyielding toil, even as your body struggled with the endless march, the crushing burden, and the monumental task of daily camp construction. Your life as a Roman soldier was utterly dominated by a pervasive and brutal system of discipline and punishment. Forget gentle encouragement or compassionate leadership. Your existence was enforced by the constant threat of physical pain and the absolute authority of your superiors, making your marching conditions profoundly horrifying. Imagine the omnipresent fear that permeated every moment of your day, from the moment you woke up in your cramped tent to the final, exhausted moment you collapsed onto your hard bed. Your centurion, the backbone of the legion, was your direct and absolute master. These men, often grizzled veterans themselves, wielded immense power, and their authority was backed by the constant threat of the vitis, a vine staff they carried. This wasn't a symbolic cane. It was a heavy, flexible club, used without hesitation to beat soldiers for any infraction. It truly sucked to be constantly afraid of your own officers. Punishment was swift, public, and often agonizingly painful. For minor infractions, a slow pace during the march, a poorly dug ditch in camp construction, a dirty piece of equipment, or even just talking out of turn, you might face a beating with the vitis. Imagine the searing pain as the heavy staff cracked against your back or shoulders, leaving deep welts and bruises. These beatings were common, expected, and designed to enforce immediate, unquestioning obedience. You learned to suppress any wince, any cry of pain, knowing that showing weakness would only invite further punishment. For more serious offenses, the consequences escalated dramatically. Flogging was a common and terrifying punishment, where you would be stripped to the waist and lashed repeatedly with a whip or rods, often in front of the entire legion. This was designed to be both physically excruciating and publicly humiliating, serving as a stark warning to others. The screams of a fellow soldier, the dull thud of the lashes, would echo through the camp, a constant reminder of the brutal discipline that kept the legion in line. Even worse was fustuarium, a rare but terrifying form of capital punishment for desertion, theft, or falling asleep on guard duty. If condemned, you would be beaten to death by your own comrades, often with clubs, in a brutal ritual of collective responsibility and absolute adherence to military law. This ensured that no soldier would ever question their duty or shirk their responsibilities. Imagine standing by, forced to participate in the execution of a comrade, or knowing that such a fate could await you for a moment's lapse. It truly sucked when your brothers in arms became executioners. This pervasive system of fear and physical discipline aimed to strip away your individuality and instill absolute, unquestioning obedience and conformity. You were reduced to a nameless cog in a vast military machine, expected to perform until you dropped, without complaint or rebellion. The centurions and higher officers cultivated an atmosphere of terror, ensuring that the human will was completely subjugated to the legion's relentless progress and the emperor's command. Your spirit, once independent, would slowly be crushed under the weight of constant threats and brutal realities. The decimation was the ultimate, most horrifying form of collective punishment, reserved for entire units that displayed cowardice, mutiny, or severe insubordination. Imagine a cohort of 480 men lined up. Every 10th man, chosen by lot, would be beaten to death by the other 9. This was an indiscriminate, terrifying act of ritual murder, designed to reestablish absolute discipline through unimaginable terror. While rare, its very existence haunted the Roman legions, ensuring that the fear of the whip extended to the fear of your own comrade's hands. One common misconception is that all Roman officers were brutal tyrants. While centurions certainly embodied harsh discipline, many were also highly respected by their men, seen as tough but fair leaders who shared the hardships of the march and fought alongside them in battle. Discipline, though severe, was seen as essential for survival and military effectiveness in a brutal world. The relationship between soldiers and their centurions was complex, a mix of fear, respect, and shared hardship. Historians still meticulously study Roman military manuals and personal accounts to understand the nuances of Roman discipline and leadership, often finding a surprising balance between harshness and a pragmatic concern for legionary morale. Furthermore, the discipline extended beyond just physical punishment. Your every action, from your marching pace to your camp-building technique, was rigorously evaluated. Mistakes led to verbal reprimands, loss of privileges, or extra duties, all designed to reinforce perfection and conformity. This constant scrutiny, combined with the threat of physical pain, ensured that you were always performing at your peak, regardless of your personal exhaustion or pain. The sheer dehumanization inherent in this system cannot be overstated. You were not a citizen whose rights were protected. You were a soldier, a body to be used, broken, and discarded as needed. Your pain, your suffering, your potential death. These were mere statistics in the grand imperial ledger, insignificant against the backdrop of the colossal military campaigns and the vastness of the Roman Empire. This deliberate stripping away of human dignity was perhaps the most terrible cost of all, endured with every disciplined step and every brutal lash. So, your daily life as a Roman soldier was not just about marching or building. It was a perpetual nightmare of iron discipline enforced by the cruel whip, the constant fear of physical punishment, the public humiliation, and the ultimate threat of death for any perceived failure ensured your absolute submission. This relentless, dehumanizing subjugation was a defining, horrifying aspect of your marching conditions, ensuring that every mile gained and every victory won was paid for with the fear, blood, and broken spirits of countless legionaries, even as your body was driven to its absolute limits by the weight, the pace, and the whip. A silent and insidious enemy constantly stalked the marching Roman legion's disease and untreated injury. Forget glorious combat deaths. For the vast majority of Roman soldiers, their lives ended not by a barbarian's blade, but by a fever, a gut ailment, or a festering wound, making these marching conditions profoundly horrifying. Imagine the pervasive smell in the marching column beyond the sweat and dust. There was often the faint, sickly scent of illness. You'd constantly hear the hacking coughs of comrades, the moans of those suffering from agonizing stomach cramps, and the labored breathing of men battling fevers. Disease spread like wildfire through the ranks, fueled by the close proximity, the unsanitary conditions of temporary camps, and the weakened state of soldiers constantly pushed to their physical limits. It truly sucked to be one sneeze away from death. Waterborne diseases were perhaps the most common and devastating killers. As discussed, water sources along the march were often contaminated by human and animal waste. Dysentery, an infection of the intestines causing severe diarrhea and dehydration. Typhoid fever and cholera would sweep through legions, rapidly debilitating and killing hundreds, sometimes thousands, of men. Imagine suffering from relentless, bloody diarrhea and vomiting, your body rapidly dehydrating, while being forced to continue marching or perform camp duties, the weakness, the agonizing cramps, and the constant loss of fluids would quickly lead to collapse and death, often in a matter of days. Respiratory illnesses were equally prevalent, especially during cold or damp campaigns. Pneumonia, bronchitis, and various fevers would thrive in the crowded, poorly ventilated tents and in bodies weakened by exhaustion and exposure. A simple cold could escalate into a fatal lung infection, choking the life out of a soldier who survived countless battles. Imagine the terrifying sensation of your lungs filling with fluid, your breath coming in ragged gasps, knowing there was nothing a Roman doctor could do. It really sucked to literally cough your lungs out. Malnutrition and exposure severely compromised your immune system. Your diet, while calorically dense, was often monotonous and lacked fresh fruits and vegetables, leading to chronic vitamin and mineral deficiencies. Constant physical exertion, sleep deprivation, and exposure to extreme weather heat stroke, hypothermia, frostbite further weakened your body's defenses. This meant that even common illnesses that your body might normally fight off could turn deadly, as your immune system was simply too depleted to respond effectively. You were a walking target for every pathogen. Beyond disease, untreated injuries were a constant threat. While gladiators, as we discussed in a previous episode, had access to specialized medici, field care for legionaries was often rudimentary, a minor cut from a fallen branch, a blister that burst and became infected, or a sprained ankle could quickly escalate into a life-threatening emergency. Without antiseptics, antibiotics, or modern wound care, even small infections could fester, leading to widespread inflammation, pus, and ultimately sepsis, a systemic infection that would cause organ failure and agonizing death. Imagine seeing a fellow soldier's leg swell and blacken from a seemingly minor wound. Knowing his fate was sealed, accidents during marching and camp construction were also common. A slipped axe, a falling stone during rampart construction, a sprained ankle on uneven terrain. These would result in injuries that, without modern medical attention, could leave you crippled for life or lead to slow, painful death. There were no immediate evacuations, no sophisticated splints, no physical therapy. You either recovered enough to march again, or you were left behind, a liability to the legion. One common misconception is that Roman legions were always healthy and robust. While they were incredibly tough and well-disciplined, Roman military records and medical treatises like those by Galen, who himself worked in a gladiatorial school, frequently detail massive losses due to disease and non-combat injuries, often far exceeding battle casualties. For example, during some campaigns, disease could wipe out more than half a legion before it even saw combat. Historians still meticulously study these logistical and medical records, as well as archaeological evidence from military hospitals' valetudinaria, to understand the true scale of illness and injury in the Roman army, confirming its devastating impact. Furthermore, the psychological toll of constantly being surrounded by sickness and suffering was immense. The sight of your comrades dying of agonizing diseases, the constant fear of contagion, and the knowledge that your own body was always at risk would erode morale and breed a pervasive sense of despair. This environment of perpetual illness made the daily march not just a physical ordeal, but a profound psychological battle against hopelessness. So, your life as a Roman soldier was a constant, terrifying dance with invisible enemies. Disease and untreated injury were far more likely to claim your life than any barbarian's blade. The relentless marching conditions, coupled with primitive medical knowledge and unsanitary environments, ensured that enduring these horrifying marching conditions meant facing a constant, pervasive threat to your very existence, making every step a gamble against sickness and a grim, often agonizing, death. Even as your body fought against the ravages of disease and injury, your march as a Roman soldier would inevitably lead you to confront one of the most terrifying and potentially deadly natural obstacles, river crossings. Forget simple bridges for the vast majority of your journey. You would face the terrifying challenge of fording treacherous, often unpredictable, rivers with your full, heavy gear, making these aquatic maneuvers profoundly horrifying. Imagine the scene after days of marching, perhaps under a scorching sun or through driving rain. Your legion arrives at the banks of a wide, fast-flowing river. There's no convenient Roman bridge in sight. Those marvels of engineering were only built on major, established routes, and legions often campaigned far beyond them instead. You face a vast expanse of murky, swirling water, its currents hinting at unseen dangers beneath the surface. You're exhausted, laden with 60 pounds of equipment, and now you're expected to cross this formidable barrier. It truly sucked to be a soldier who also had to be a swimmer. The first challenge was the current. Many rivers, especially those swollen by recent rains or mountain meltwater, could have incredibly strong, invisible currents capable of sweeping a man off his feet. Imagine wading into icy, fast-moving water, feeling the current tugging at your legs, threatening to pull you downstream. A single misstep, a moment of lost balance, and you could be dragged under, your heavy sarcina and chuck armor acting as anchors, pulling you relentlessly to the bottom. Then there was the depth and hidden obstacles. The riverbed could be uneven, with sudden drops, treacherous holes, or slippery rocks, submerged logs, debris, or even hidden quicksand could ensnare a soldier, turning a routine crossing into a desperate struggle for survival. You couldn't see what lay beneath the murky surface, forcing you to step into the unknown, trusting only the man in front of you. Imagine feeling your feet sink unexpectedly, or stumbling over a hidden rock, your heavy load shifting precariously. It really sucked to gamble your life on unseen riverbeds. The weight of your equipment became a deadly liability. Your lorica segmentata or hamata, your scutum, your delabra, all these items, so vital for combat and camp construction, would become immense burdens in the water if you fell or lost your footing. Your heavy gear would drag you down with terrifying speed. Even if you were a strong swimmer, a skill not explicitly taught to all legionaries, the sheer weight of your sarcina and armor could overwhelm you, making escape almost impossible. Many Roman soldiers drowned during river crossings. Their bodies never recovered, lost to the depths along with their valuable equipment. The cold of the water, especially in northern provinces or during cooler seasons, added another layer of horror. Plunging into icy river water after a long march, perhaps already fatigued or suffering from exposure, could induce severe hypothermia. Your muscles would cramp, your body would begin to shut down, and your coordination would rapidly deteriorate, making it even harder to navigate the current and keep your head above water. The Roman military developed various techniques for river crossings, reflecting the gravity of the challenge. Sometimes, legions would build temporary bridges of timber or pontoon boats, but this was time-consuming and only feasible for major crossings. More often, soldiers would form human chains, linking arms or holding onto ropes. To provide stability against the current, cavalry might lead the way, breaking the current, or strong swimmers would secure ropes across the river. Imagine trusting your life entirely to the grip of the man beside you, knowing that if one link broke, dozens could be swept away. This terrifying interdependence made every crossing a collective gamble with death. One common misconception is that Roman legions avoided major rivers without proper bridges. In reality, campaigning often meant crossing numerous natural barriers. Roman military treatises, like those by Vegetius, detail various methods of river crossing, from building rafts to using inflatable skins. But they all acknowledge the inherent danger and the need for rigorous discipline. The fact that they practice these dangerous crossings so meticulously underscores their perceived necessity for military campaigns. Historians still meticulously study archaeological evidence of Roman river defenses and temporary bridge constructions, as well as textual accounts of riverine battles, to understand the significant logistical and tactical challenges posed by rivers in Roman warfare. Furthermore, the threat wasn't just from the water itself. While crossing, you would be incredibly vulnerable to enemy attack. An enemy on the far bank could rain down arrows, javelins, or sling stones on your exposed, struggling legionaries, turning a difficult crossing into a bloody massacre. This added a tactical layer of peril to an already terrifying natural obstacle, forcing legions to secure both banks before attempting a full crossing. So, your marching life as a Roman soldier was punctuated by the profound and constant danger of river crossings, the treacherous currents, the hidden depths, the deadly weight of your equipment, and the chilling cold of the water made every river a potential grave. These terrifying aquatic maneuvers, requiring immense courage, discipline, and reliance on your comrades, were a truly horrifying aspect of enduring marching conditions, ensuring that even the most disciplined legionary faced moments of visceral fear far from the battlefield. Even as your body struggled against the incredible weight, the relentless pace, the unpredictable weather, and the terrifying river crossings, your Roman march was fundamentally defined by the very ground beneath your feet. Forget the legendary, perfectly paved Roman roads. The reality of unpaved, unforgiving terrain was a constant, grueling torment that made your marching conditions profoundly horrifying. Imagine the road ahead. While Roman engineers were indeed masters of road building, constructing paved highways across vast swathes of the empire, these were primarily for strategic, long-distance routes or civilian trade. The vast majority of your campaigning, especially in frontier regions or during active military operations, would take you off these famous roads and onto rough, unpaved tracks, treacherous mountain paths, or simply across open country. It truly sucked when the Roman road was just dirt. You would march day after day over uneven ground, rocky hillsides, deeply rutted tracks, and fields churned to mud by previous columns or heavy rains. Every step would require conscious effort, constantly adjusting your balance under your heavy sarcina to avoid stumbling or twisting an ankle. The constant jarring and unevenness would send shock waves through your knees, hips, and spine. Contributing to chronic pain and long-term joint problems, your hobnailed sandals, caligae, while durable, offered little cushioning against this relentless pounding. In mountainous terrain, the challenge intensified exponentially. You would climb steep, rocky ascents, often hauling your immense load up narrow, winding paths where a single misstep could send you tumbling down a perilous incline. Descending would be equally treacherous, putting immense strain on your knees and requiring constant vigilance to maintain your footing. The altitude could make breathing difficult, and the thin air combined with a heavy exertion would quickly lead to exhaustion. Imagine scaling a mountain in full gear, your lungs burning, your legs screaming, knowing you had to do it again tomorrow. It really sucked to literally climb your way to exhaustion. Forests and dense woodland presented their own set of horrors. You might have to hack your way through thick undergrowth, navigating through tangled roots and thorny bushes. Your progress slowed to a crawl. The confined spaces would limit visibility. increasing the risk of ambush. The damp, shaded environment would also be a breeding ground for insects and provide little relief from the pervasive dampness. Mud and mire were constant companions in many regions, particularly during the rainy seasons or in marshy areas. Roads, even those with some foundation, would turn into deep, sucking quagmires. You would slog through knee-deep mud, your caligae often getting stuck, forcing you to pull them free with immense effort, sometimes losing them entirely. Your legs would be perpetually caked in heavy, clinging mud, adding significant weight to your already immense burden and draining your stamina with every agonizing step. This constant dampness and filth would also lead to foot rot, skin infections, and general misery. It really sucked to wade through ankle-deep mud day after day. Then there were the riverbeds and ravines instead of bridges. You might be forced to march directly through the bottoms of dry riverbeds, filled with loose rocks and uneven surfaces, or navigate deep, treacherous ravines where the footing was constantly shifting. These were natural traps, prone to sudden flash floods or rockfalls, adding another layer of unpredictable danger to your march. One common misconception is that the Roman road epitomizes all Roman marching routes. While the famous paved roads were indeed marvels of engineering, they constituted only a fraction of the vast network of paths and trails Roman legions traversed. Much of their campaigning occurred in areas where such infrastructure didn't exist or hadn't been completed, forcing them to adapt to the raw, untamed landscape. Historians still meticulously study Roman military logistics, not just through paved roads, but also through archaeological evidence of temporary camps and unpaved routes. To understand the full spectrum of terrain challenges faced by the legions, furthermore, the very act of marching over such difficult terrain, day after day, year after year, had cumulative effects on your body, chronic injuries, wear and tear on your joints, spinal issues, and foot deformities would become your grim companions, even if you survived a long career. Your body would be permanently etched with the harsh reality of the unforgiving ground you had traversed. The terrain wasn't just an obstacle, it was a slow, relentless grinder, chipping away at your physical well-being. The psychological toll of this endless, brutal terrain cannot be overstated. The monotony of the physical effort, combined with the constant vigilance required to avoid a stumble or a fall, would erode your spirit. You were perpetually battling the very earth beneath your feet, turning every step into a monumental struggle, and ensuring that the land itself became an enemy as formidable as any barbarian tribe. So, your Roman march was not a leisurely stroll on smooth paved roads. It was a relentless, agonizing journey over unpaved, unforgiving terrain, defined by rocky inclines, sucking mud, dense forests, and treacherous riverbeds. This constant, pervasive battle against the very ground beneath your feet was a defining, horrifying aspect of enduring marching conditions, ensuring that every single mile gained by the Roman Empire was paid for with the sweat, blood, and broken bodies of its legionaries. You've endured the crushing burden of your gear, the relentless pace of the march, the brutal assaults of extreme weather, the gnawing hunger and thirst, the monumental task of building a camp nightly, the constant terror of the centurion's whip, the silent ravages of disease and injury, and the terrifying perils of river crossings and unforgiving terrain. As the distant sounds of marching feet fade and the phantom ache in your shoulders finally subsides, a profound, lingering truth settles upon you. The horrifying marching conditions of a Roman soldier didn't just break your body. They waged a relentless war on your spirit, leaving you a hardened, weary, and often numb survivor. Consider the profound physical toll you endured. Your body, a marvel of human endurance, was pushed beyond its limits daily. Chronic pain, crippling injuries, and debilitating diseases were constant companions, slowly wearing you down. Your feet were a mass of calluses and blisters, your back perpetually aching from the immense load, your muscles strained and torn from relentless exertion. You were often malnourished, constantly thirsty, and perpetually exhausted, a living testament to the sheer physical brutality of your daily existence. Your existence was a continuous act of physical suffering. Then there's the unrelenting psychological warfare. You lived under the constant threat of the centurion's whip, the chilling fear of decimation, and the pervasive anxiety of an arbitrary, brutal discipline. The sight of your comrades collapsing from exhaustion, succumbing to disease, or drowning in a river crossing would leave indelible scars on your mind. You were forced to witness and endure suffering on an unimaginable scale, fostering a sense of despair and a terrifying desensitization to death and pain. This constant exposure to brutality eroded your spirit, transforming you from a civilian into a hardened, often emotionally numb, killing machine. The loss of autonomy and individuality was absolute. Your life was not your own. It belonged entirely to the Legion and the Emperor. Every step, every action, every moment of your day was dictated by rigid military discipline. You couldn't choose your path, your food, or your resting place, your personal desires, your fears, your very identity were systematically suppressed, replaced by the collective will of the Legion. You were a perfectly functioning cog in a vast, efficient machine, but a cog nonetheless, stripped of your personal freedom. It truly sucked to be a human drone. The monotony of hardship itself was a unique form of torment. It wasn't just the intensity of the suffering, but its relentless, unending nature, day after day, week after week, year after year. The same grueling march, the same back-breaking labor, the same meager rations, the same constant threats. This perpetual cycle of discomfort and danger eroded your spirit, leaving you with a profound sense of weariness that went beyond mere physical fatigue. Life became a long, monotonous endurance test, with very little joy or relief. One common misconception is that all Roman soldiers were stoic, unfeeling machines. While their training certainly cultivated stoicism and resilience, human emotions cannot be entirely suppressed. Roman personal letters, poetry, and even archaeological findings from military camps sometimes reveal instances of camaraderie, despair, homesickness, and even rebellion, suggesting a complex emotional landscape beneath the disciplined exterior. The very need for brutal discipline also implies that resistance and emotional struggles were always present. Historians still meticulously study these diverse sources to understand the nuanced psychological realities of Roman soldiers, acknowledging their deep suffering despite their formidable outward appearance. Furthermore, the ultimate purpose of your suffering, the expansion and maintenance of the Roman Empire, could offer only cold comfort. You endured unimaginable horrors for a distant ideal, for the glory of Rome, a concept that often felt very abstract on a muddy, freezing march in a foreign land. Your sacrifices contributed to an empire that saw you as a disposable resource, a tool for conquest, rather than a cherished citizen. This dissonance between the grand purpose and your personal misery added another layer of psychological weight. Your long-term fate, even if you survived your 20 or 25 years of service, was often marred by the physical and mental scars of your career, chronic pain, lasting injuries, and psychological trauma would plague your retirement. You might return to a world that no longer felt like home, estranged from the civilian life you once knew, forever defined by the horrors you had endured on the march. Your reward was often merely survival, a grim prize for a life of relentless hardship. So, your life as a Roman soldier was a testament to enduring horrifying marching conditions that transcended mere physical discomfort. It was a brutal, relentless assault on your body, your mind, and your very spirit, stripping away your freedom and individuality, leaving you a hardened, weary, and often numb survivor. Every mile gained by the Roman Empire was paved not just with its famous roads, but with the profound, anonymous suffering of countless legionaries, whose lives were defined by this unyielding, terrible grind. As you now drift into a deep, comforting sleep, let the distant sounds of marching feet and the phantom ache of your ancient burden finally subside. You're safe, warm, and free, incredibly far removed from the brutal realities of a Roman legionary's existence. May your dreams be peaceful, filled with the quiet certainty of comfort, warmth, and the profound freedom to choose your own path. A stark contrast to the horrifying truth we've explored tonight. And now, good night, and have sweet dreams.